this too. So, okay. So yeah, Bamby, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so glad we have a chance to talk after last week. So first off, how are you doing? How's everything in LA? How are you coping with everything going on with COVID personally? How are you doing?
I am doing well. All this global pandemic obviously has affected me personally. Some people who I love dearly, has passed to a better life.
Mm-hmm.
But also, on the day-to-day basis, our community continues to struggle through this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just trying to do the best that we can. Our organization has been open through all of this, just providing basic services and food to people. So we certainly are doing the best that we can due to the circumstances.
And for folks who may not know about the Trans Latino Coalition, just talk a little bit about the organization and the type of work that it does, and specifically folks that you serve. So again, just for folks who may not know what the Trans Latino Coalition does, talk a little bit about your work.
Of course. The Trans Latina is a national advocacy organization that started in 2009 that also started providing direct supportive and life-saving services to trans and gender nonconforming people in Los Angeles through the Center for Violence Prevention and Transgender Wellness. And we, since 2015, well, actually in January of 2016, when we got our first grant from the Elton John AIDS Foundation, we have been able to build a multi-purpose, multi-service space in which, we have a multiplicity of services, including a drop-in space for people to come and, be safe. We provide clothing for those who may need it, hygiene kits for individuals. We provide legal services specifically focused on immigration. We have an anti-violence project. We have reentry services supporting trans people who are getting released from jail, prison, and immigration detention. Mm-hmm. We also do policy work. And what else do we do? We also have a transitional housing program that is called the Hope House. HOPE is an acronym, is helping our people evolve. So it's a 6-month transitional housing program supporting trans people to get into like more permanent living situation. Mm-hmm. We also do workforce development and HIV prevention, specifically focused on PrEP. We just recently got a grant from the State of California Office of AIDS to connect trans Latinx individuals into PrEP. Mm-hmm. So those are the different types of services that we provide to our community in Los Angeles.
And how many?
And we also give food every day.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask, how many clients or how many people does your organization work with, say, on a monthly basis? Any ballpark figure?
Well, we have, different programs. So we also have an outreach program that, is funded through the city of West Hollywood. But we go through different places around the Los Angeles County. And through that program, we see about 300 trans people, like in a period of a year. And then through the different programs, we have a caseload on our case management services for our anti-violence project. We have about 40 people. We have about 30 people that we're supporting through our legal services. We have about 50 people that we are supporting through our reentry services. So, I guess, and then we serve, about every week, we serve about 150 meals. Mm-hmm. So, a month and then a year, obviously, like it adds up. So
quite a lot of people.
yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Talk about how the COVID pandemic has specifically affected the folks with whom you and your organization works. Talk about what you've been hearing from your clients and folks who are affiliated with Trans Latino Coalition.
Yeah, so obviously this pandemic has affected everyone, right? But I think it's important to acknowledge and recognize, right, how this has specifically impacted trans populations, right? So just to give you an idea, our calls to our center have increased up to 500%.
Wow.
From people calling, just being scared of losing their place where they're living, those who are privileged enough to have a place to live, and even those who had employment, right? The majority of them have been laid off, and the majority of those individuals who were working primarily in the service industry, including, for trans women, the majority of jobs that they get is, working at bars, doing, female impersonations and things like that. Also like in beauty salons and those type of, things. And even some individuals who were working like at restaurants and, or janitorial work, right? The majority of them have lost their jobs. And through that, obviously, not having the ability to pay for their place where they're living and stuff like that. So it has been like sort of like a trip, like a recurring effect, right? Or a rippling effect. And we anticipate that many members of our community are going to, end up homeless because of the situation that they are experiencing right now. And I think one of the things that I'm also, predicting is that, like if we understand the positionality of trans people within our society today, right? In 2020, we are the most poor, right? Like there's been studies that said that trans people make about $10,000 a year, right? And so we're one of the most poor, and because of everything that is happening with COVID-19, we anticipate that that our community is going to be set even further behind. So there's going to be more homeless people. There's going to be, people who are going to obviously going to need employment, but because of the discrimination that we experience while trying to access employment, right? We anticipate that more people are going to be unemployed, and it's going to be harder for trans people to really, get employment, which again will set us, further behind than where we already were. So it's really challenging, and it's really fortunate that throughout all of this, I know that this pandemic has affected everyone, right? But again, looking the positionality of trans people, we're definitely going to be set further behind.
Have transgender people, and especially those who might be undocumented in California, where you are, Bamby, have they been included in any sort of stimulus package or stimulus efforts or recovery efforts, whether that's from the city of Los Angeles, for example, or California, not necessarily at the federal level, but talk about the inclusion of these folks in any sort of economic stimulus, if they have been at all included?
Well, actually, so let's start at the federal level, right? Again, the majority of trans people don't necessarily have employment, right? And even those who did, so the majority of trans people didn't get a stimulus package or those $1,200 that the federal government was supposed to give out. But even here locally, right? we know that the that the state of California, for instance, allocated $75 million to support undocumented individuals across the state, right? And here in Los Angeles County, 20 of those 75 millions came to Los Angeles County, which were distributed specifically to 3 organizations, right? That obviously, they have done great work over the years, but the requirements for people to have access to that money is very heterocentric way of thinking, right? So they're asking people to provide they're asking for people to provide a proof of residency, for instance. They're asking for people to provide how people have been impacted by COVID-19. In other words, like if they were employed, they need to get a letter from their employer. In many trans individuals who are undocumented, the majority are not working. The majority are. And another requirement is that they are only going to give $1,000 per household. So, the majority of trans people who have a place to stay, who are undocumented, are living in, multiple of them are living in one space, right? So if there's let's say 5 trans women who are undocumented who live in an apartment, only 2 of them will have access to that. And we are already hearing from members of our community that they are being denied for not being able to provide any of those requirements or any of those things that they are asking
When you say they're denied, is this by the state of California?
Well, they're being denied by the organizations because those organizations are the ones who are supposed to collect that information.
I see.
But my sense is, or my understanding is that those requirements have come through the state of California.
Okay.
And we as an organization actually had put a statement really stating how these requirements are not inclusive of trans people who are undocumented. So we did send a letter to the director of the Department of Social Services from the state, and also to Antonia Jimenez, who is the director of social services here in Los Angeles County. And to be honest with you, I think the fact that they only give 3 specific organizations that money, right? It's not good, right? Because I don't know, but I get the sense that that these organizations, and I'm just gonna say that these organizations, hog the money, right? And I think that was a mistake.
And which organization?
From the state.
Which organizations received the money from the state?
So in Los Angeles, there's Chirla, Carecen, and Asian Americans Advancing Justice.
Okay.
The 3 organizations that received $20 million to support 40,000 undocumented people here in Los Angeles.
I see. Okay.
And there were obviously, other organizations across the state who got that money. But again, I think, there's issues that have happened with that. I don't think the organizations who got the money were ready, and they didn't have they didn't build the infrastructure that was needed in order to support 40,000 undocumented individuals here in Los Angeles. And so one of, some of the issues that are happening is that people are not able to get through those lines when they call. And also, like in their website, there's, they don't have the infrastructure, like basically their system crashed. And so I think the mistake that the state made was that they only give the money to specific organizations rather than distributing the money to organizations that specifically work with different types of populations, so that you
Mhm.
know so that the majority of those individuals who need the support can actually be supported.
And have you, after the press release that you sent out, I think it was last week you sent it out, have you heard any have you received any response from LA County as well as the state on that? Any response as of yet?
No, unfortunately, we haven't. Obviously, people are busy with whatever they're doing, right? I mean, obviously, we're experiencing a global pandemic,
Hmm.
and it is no surprise that trans people is not a priority to government agencies and to individuals. So, unfortunately, we haven't heard anything, but we're definitely going to continue to follow up.
And please keep us posted on that too.
Of course.
I want to ask you about the LGBTQ migrant situation. Right before I came on, I checked the latest statistics from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and they said the latest statistics are there's 1,201 confirmed cases of COVID among detainees. There's 2,394 detainees who've been tested. There, as of May 16th, there's 26,660 detainees in ICE custody. As I'm sure you know, there's a really big outbreak at Otay Mesa Detention Center in San Diego. There's 155 cases. They've had one death there, and I believe there was a second death at another detention facility. I think it was in Georgia just yesterday. So, and I know that Latino Coalition has been very outspoken against the treatment of transgender folks in ICE custody for a very long time. So talk about that situation. First off, just give me your general thoughts about what's going on in these detention centers, and specifically for trans people who might find themselves there during this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's definitely very unfortunate situation that, specifically trans women are experiencing while detained at ICE detention centers, right? And we actually, a couple of weeks ago, we released a video from trans women who are detained in Aurora, Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
which, this video obviously highlights, right? Not just the fear that trans women who are in immigration detention are experiencing of becoming infected with COVID-19, but
Mm-hmm.
also the inability, right? The inability to do anything to defend themselves, right? Because they are just there. And what we know is that individuals who come out to the world, right, to the free world, and come back in are potentially the carriers of COVID-19. And then in addition to that, obviously the individuals who are also newly coming into the immigration detentions are potential carriers.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is unfortunate situations because people who are there, like, where can they go, right?
Yeah.
And so where we're asking really is for ICE to release all trans women who are in immigration detention. But particularly, we have a campaign to free Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly is a young trans Salvadoreña girl, mujer, right, who has been in immigration detention for almost 3 years.
Wow.
And ICE has denied her parole requests multiple occasions and has been moved from one detention center to another. Um, and every time they do that, we have to start all over again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it seems like they're denying her parole as a punishment because of the work that we're doing outside advocating for her. She's not doing anything but just being there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we are the ones who are like demanding for her to be free. She's only 23 years old and she's been there almost 3 years. So,
Mm-hmm.
it really is unfortunate that she she's not being released just because ICE is being a stubborn and really not letting her come out.
Do you think they're punishing Kelly because she's been speaking out publicly about the situation, especially with COVID?
I think, I mean, obviously, ICE is not going to say the truth, right? But I think it has something to do with that, you
Yeah.
know?
Mm-hmm.
I think those are just tactics that they use, right? To really punish someone, even though they'll never tell you that they're punishing her. That's exactly what they're doing.
And I know that you launched the campaign for Kelly's release, I want to say maybe a month or so ago. And I know we reported on that. But have you spoken to Kelly at all recently? And if so, has there been any movement in her case, or is she still in Aurora in Colorado?
Yeah, we actually we've been with this campaign for about 6 months now.
Oh, 6 months. Okay.
Yeah, but you know, like we just are trying, due to the circumstances, right, that we're experiencing right now, specifically with COVID-19. We just, you know, trying to be creative and find ways to continue to bring attention to her case and really push ICE to release her. But yeah, I mean, I talk to Kelly at least once a week. She also is in communication with different people. You know, we have someone in New Mexico who, you know, we've actually gone on the ground to see Kelly in person in Colorado since she was transferred from New Mexico. So, you know, we write to her, we put money in her books. And, you know, we also put money in others people's books. But yeah, I mean, we try to really maintain communication with Kelly because her mental health, you know, it really is deteriorating because of, you know, the time that she's been there. And, you know, it's just the conditions that not only her, but all trans women who are in immigration detention continue to experience.
And I know that the Trans Latino Coalition was among the groups that were, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I think that the Trans Latino Coalition was in touch with some of the trans women who were at Cibola. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe Cibola has closed. Is that correct?
Yes. So we did have a
And I visited there a year ago, just for the record, too. It was
yes.
quite an experience. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. So we do have a rapid response team in New Mexico that is led by Alma Rosa Silva Bañuelos. And in fact, we were supporting trans women who were in immigration detention in New Mexico directly. You know, we were doing visitations and we were in constant contact with them. In fact, you know, one of the campaigns that we did before was to free Alejandra.
Yeah, I remember her case too.
Yeah, and so so Alejandra was in Cibola, New Mexico, as was Kelly. But then a couple of months ago, the Cibola Immigration Detention Center closed down for, you know, multiple reasons, right? Like not just the treatment that trans women were experiencing there, the inhumane treatment, but also a couple of deaths that happened to trans women in that facility, and really the facility not being equipped to really support trans women who were there. So again, one of ICE's tactics, instead of just letting people out and just, you know, go being with people and community family members that they may have, they just decided to transfer people to two facilities, one in Aurora, New Mexico, and the other one to Tacoma, Washington. So we connected with people on the ground in both in Tacoma and New Mexico, and we are continuing to figure out how we can continue to support trans people who are in immigration detention, not just in these two facilities, but as we know, trans people are in, you know, in every place, right? They're in El Paso, they're in San Diego, as you mentioned. In Georgia, there's people in different places, trans people.
Mhm.
And so, we continue to support trans people to the best of our ability, of course.
And a couple more quick questions I want to ask you to wrap it up. A couple of weeks ago, there was a federal lawsuit filed on behalf of Roxana Hernandez's family. And Roxana, as you obviously know, was the trans woman from Honduras with HIV who died after she was in Cibola. Her family has sued 5 of the private companies that oversaw her care. So any comment on that particular lawsuit as it relates to Roxana's case?
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely great, right? That that legal entities are supporting Rosana's family and Rosana's memory, right? Because it is important that that we demand justice, for not just Rosana but also Joanna Medina, who also perished in immigration detention. But even, this type of situations have been happening for a long time, right? I mean, I remember in 2006 when, oh my goodness, what was her name?
Is it
Uh,
Victoria Arellano?
yes, Victoria Arellano, exactly. When she died in ICE custody, right? And nothing has changed since, and so I think the only thing that changed was in 2015 when ICE put out this memo, right, in creating this
Mhm.
transgender specific pods to house trans women, claiming that the conditions were going to be better, but obviously that is not the case, right? Because, Rosanna and Joanna obviously died in ICE custody because of the lack of support and the lack of competency for these institutions to really support trans lives.
Mhm. And then finally, the final question, and this is kind of a broader question, as we start to move out of the immediate impact of the pandemic, as things start to open up, as we try to talk about what folks have coined as a recovery, what is that going to look like for transgender women and gender nonconforming people that your organization serves? How can we help them be part of that recovery moving forward once it actually starts to happen?
As I mentioned earlier, right, this global pandemic, has set our community behind even further than how we were, right? So there's definitely multiple things that we have to do in order for us to get to a better place, and not just after this pandemic, but really for us to be a better place within our society as trans and gender nonconforming people.
Mhm.
Um, One is that what needs to happen is that not just the government sector, but also the philanthropic sector to really invest in trans lives, right?
Mhm.
Understand that, that there's um, there's a lot of work that needs to happen in terms of equity and distribution of resources, right? Um, for instance, like right now, we actually do have a campaign to invest in trans lives, targeting both the government and the private sector. On the private sector, I'm not sure if you're aware, but in March 30th of this year, an organization that is called Funders for LGBTQ Issues
Mhm.
released a report and grant funding specifically for LGBTQ organizations, issues, programming, not just in the United States, but globally.
Mhm.
And in this report, LGBTQ funders stated that 4 cents of every $100 were allocated specifically to support trans-led organizations,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Mind you, trans-led organizations um, have starting to pop up the last 5 years, right? And the previous report, when they released the report in 2015, back then the language that they used was that they were that 1 penny out of every $100 were allocated for trans programming, not trans-led organizations, but trans programming, meaning
Mhm.
that that money was going to potentially LGBT centers that were doing trans programming, right? So in the last 5 years, there has been an eruption of trans-led organizations that, we're really coming into our power, and we are understanding that um, only us really can support and understand the specific needs of our community. And we are doing the work, and we have been doing the work for a long, long time. It's just that resources have not been allocated specifically to support us. And so we are obviously, demanding for trans leadership to continue to be developed, right? So this time around, when they released this report in which they clearly state that 4 cents out of every $100 are going to trans-led organizations, that is not equitable, right?
Yeah.
And so we're asking the philanthropic world, specifically, and the fund the LGBT causes, right, to really allocate 20% of their full docket into trans lives, into trans-led organizations, right? So that they continue to support not just trans leadership, but continue to develop the infrastructure of these organizations that are coming up and popping up, right? So that's one way. But the other way is that through the government sector, here in the state of California, we are advocating for budget allocation to allocate $100 million across the state that will specifically be dedicated to trans-led organizations and also trans-led groups, meaning there are groups who are fiscally sponsored. And so for those organizations that are supporting those trans-led groups to really support their work intentionally. So we're asking 5 different departments within the state to support trans lives, and that is Health and Human Services, the Department of Social Services, so Health and Human Services through Assembly Bill 2218, that is led by, or that is sponsored by Assembly Member Santiago, to allocate $15 million for healthcare services. So what we're saying with healthcare, we're not just saying physical or medical care, right? For us, and for us to be able to build a healthy trans community, we need to look at a holistic care, right? Meaning physical, mental, spiritual, and just holistic care as a whole, right? And so we're asking for $15 million for healthcare services. We're asking for $20 million for workforce development. We're asking for $30 million for capacity building and training. And we're asking for $20 million for housing, and we're asking for $20 million for data collection. And so we're asking for 5 different components to this budget advocacy through the government here in the state of California.
What's the response been to those proposals, if there's been any so far?
Well, the Assembly Bill 2218 just passed the Health Committee. So we're very excited of that. So we're about 3 more steps before it actually goes into the governor's desk. And we're hoping that the governor ultimately sign this bill. So I think next is going to go through appropriations, and then it goes, through the Senate side for the same thing, and then ultimately goes to the governor's desk. So it should be on the governor's desk by October. So we're hoping that, that comes through, and that all the different departments support and understand the importance of investing in trans lives. And that obviously, resources are allocated across the state to trans-led groups and organizations.
And the other 4 issues you cited, is that also through legislation, or is that more through just agency budgets? Or...
Yeah, it's just a budget advocacy.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, we're very lucky that Assemblymember Santiago decided to take this on and introduce this bill,
Mm-hmm.
which it's really remarkable that we have a cis heterosexual man who really understood and took on the importance of really investing in trans lives. So it's definitely great that we have been able to build this partnership with Assemblymember Santiago.
Well, keep I was gonna say, keep us posted on all of that stuff.
Of course.
In LA will be, my colleague Karen will be very interested to hear more about that. So, well, Bamby, I gotta wrap it up. But thank you so much for your time. I'm glad our technical issues didn't mess things up today. So.
Yeah, no, I'm very glad that we were able to connect and really,
likewise.
And to really do this. But yeah, thank you again so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, and keep us posted on everything, and stay well, my friend, okay?
Of course. Be well. Thanks again.
Anytime. Bye-bye.